Okay, I'd like to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time in your busy and somewhat stressful life, because I think that seems to be the buzzword. Everybody is stressed in some capacity or another. I'd like to welcome everybody to COVID-19 Tough Decisions for Business Owners. We're on episode 30 now, and today's session is Recruiting 101, the do's and don'ts for effective hiring. We started this series a week after Ontario basically shut down to everything but non-essential services. And we wanted to provide answers for business owners, HR decision makers, and managers to understand what's happening in this COVID-19 era and to provide tips and strategies for you. And again, thank you very much to Lauren Davies and the East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring us since June. So, what we're going to talk about today is essentially Recruitment 101, getting back to basics and talking about the do's and don'ts of effective hiring. What we want to start with is just help you identify some of the key fundamentals for effective hiring, and then talk about the do's and how that can save you money, and the don'ts about how you don't want to turn away your next key hire. And so our strategies are hopefully going to resonate with you. I encourage all of you, as you hear things, put it in the chat line, because this is part of the richness of talking and sharing our ideas, that you also share your ideas. So put them in the chat line. Just a little bit about myself. I am the president and chief people. I'm the president and the chief people officer of People Bright Consulting. We are a full service HR consulting firm, and we also created a concept called Connect with Rev Up, and that's really helping leaders with their people management skills. So important now, especially with COVID. Most people could manage before, but in COVID times, they're being challenged to be more effective managers. So I'm pleased to provide that kind of training opportunity for people. I'm very passionate about healthy workplaces, and my husband and I had a previous business where it was an engineering firm, and we became one of the best workplaces in Canada. The ideas we thought about to create a strong work culture really came to fruition, and we were recognized as the top 10 best workplaces in Canada twice. I am started a podcast called Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gan, and it is weekly stories about entrepreneurs and their struggles and their successes. So if you like to learn from other people's experiences, join me on Rev Up Your Potential. I'd also like to introduce Pari Nejatie. She is the principal recruiter at People Bright Consulting, and she's got over 20 years of experience in global marketing, healthcare, pharmaceutical, technology software, and cannabis recruiting at the manager and senior levels. So she is an executive recruiter, and she hires C-suite software and sales and marketing. Between the two of us, we have over 50 years of recruiting people. That sounds like a lot. So her 20 plus isn't just 20, so mine isn't 30, okay? So the two of us have a lot of experience, and we want to be able to kind of share that. So if you've got questions, if you've got comments, do put it in the chat line, because I think we can learn a lot from each other today. So I want to start off by talking about the recruitment cycle. And I want people to go in and start our first poll, and then Perry and I are going to comment on this. But every company should have a recruiting process cycle. So let's go into poll number 1, which is asking you to identify all the practices you currently have in your company or organization. It is a multiple choice question. So we'll give you some time to do that. And I should also let Perry speak after I introduced you, Perry.
That's fine, not to worry. As we're answering the poll questions, we just wanted to obviously connect with our community to explain that it's not easy to recruit. We all know this, and that's my sole purpose most days. What we do recognize is if companies are not prepared, the recruitment process is not effective. So the best thing we can guide clients to do is very particular to this polling questions, have a very strong structure in place. So when you are reaching out to have recruiters or HR recruit internally, they're not spinning their wheels and they're not wasting valuable company time and candidate time and hiring manager time. So it's very important that companies recognize that if you are going to start the process, make sure at least the foundation is there and then begin the process.
How's the poll going, Jenny?
Waiting for a few more to vote, but otherwise, whenever you want.
Okay. So Jenny is the producer or whatever you call it during the session.
Okay,
If you have any things you want to ask privately, you can just go in and select Jenny Ho and ask your question privately as well. So are we ready to post those results?
Sure.
Okay, go for it.
All right. So surprisingly, actually, at least for me, background and reference checks are the majority. Or yeah, and then there is templates for offer letter. Use a recruitment agency is third. And then fourth, we have use of a set of behavioral-based interview questions, onboarding and orientation program. And then last is well-defined recruiting process.
Really? I don't get the results, so I have to hear what you guys say. What was the percentage of people who have a well-defined recruiting process?
33%.
Wow. And how many people have the reference checks and background?
Well, 100%.
Well, kudos to everybody because I sometimes get the feeling that some companies don't do their reference checks um, on some candidates. What were you saying, Jenny?
Oh no, I think it's someone who came on but wasn't muted.
Oh, okay.
Just muted her, yeah.
So that's very interesting. So all of those things are things that are in this recruitment process, and I'm curious as to why people don't have some kind of recruitment process. If people could put in the chat line why it's only 33%, and then Pari and I are going to kind of talk about this. We created this at People Bright, and you'll see it in many other organizations and consulting firms. They've created a recruitment process cycle for people to follow. Ours is fairly simple. We just have the broad headings to remind you that these are things that you should be doing. Jenny.
Actually, Malik had a very great question. What are some of the testing processes you have in place? For example, like Myers-Briggs, DISC, etc. And this is actually a great question because Hilda and I were making this poll and we took away those psychometric testing. So yes, that is a very good practice to put in your recruitment process.
Okay, we'll answer that question and then we'll go through this. Hi, Malik. So,
Hi.
good to see you. Oh, you got your picture of your daughter. So, psychometric testing is something that some people have started to use. And Myers-Briggs is one of them, Strength Finders, Strong. There's a whole bunch of ones. And there's one that I love called Fascination Advantage. And Fascination Advantage actually focuses on how the world sees you. And I love this because it's a 16-page report once you do it, and it focuses on you and your strengths in a very positive way. So it validates who you thought you were and how the world sees you. And when you actually use your languages, your top two languages, you speak with more authenticity, you speak with more confidence, and so it validates that. I love the other ones too, but this one's always resonated with me. I find that you only spend 20 minutes to an hour with a candidate, and some people hire based on that short connection. When we were iTrends, we actually validated that with a psychometric testing because we wanted to confirm our initial thoughts. So that's my thinking on psychometric testing. Pari, do you have any comments? Or Malik, do you want to pop in and share something?
Well, I just recently heard about DISC as one psychometric testing, and I know that I guess like some of these things, I wonder, do you have to buy the copyright to a program like DISC or Myers-Briggs, or how does it work? Or do you hire a recruitment agency like yourself and they already have these psychometric testing available?
It's a combination. You can certainly buy the tests, and usually work with an agent to buy tests, or you can have them come in and do things. So in the case of one time we had a disc training session, and I further bought more disc sets as we brought on new hires and used that because I became comfortable with that. And similarly with Fascination Advantage, I sell the tests as well as interpret the tests for people and do training sessions, helping people team build with the tests. It's really, really a good thing, whether it's disc or fascination or very other things. So let's go on with the rest of the recruiting process. It's important to have a process and to understand it so that it's repeatable and the system runs smoothly. So first of all, it's about identifying that need for a job and some of the parameters under that. It's then reviewing the potential candidates, interviewing them, and then selecting them. So when we did the poll, we asked some of these comments. So in the interest of time, I want to zero in on a couple, and I'll ask Pari to comment on some of the ones she finds are really important in this process.
So just one thing I will share, the last 6 years, I've had less and less job descriptions offered and more complex positions requested. And it's fine, I can figure it out, but if the client doesn't know what they're asking for and I'm aiming in the dark in the market, it's really hard to find collaboration and find the right talent for them. So as much as I think job descriptions tend to look very redundant over time, we need some critical must-haves to start the process, if not a full-on job description. But with startups, they're just trying to wing it, trying to figure things out as they're going. We try to support them and get some of these job descriptions in front of them. But if you're an established company or you're no longer in your startup phase, really invest heavily in creating very, I wouldn't say too detailed, but very critical job descriptions. So what your must-haves are there. We don't want things like must have effective communication skills on a job description. That's a given. We should already know that. Reducing them to the point where it's just critical must-have. So then when you do partner with an agency, or if you do have HR hiring internally, that is going to be their focus and they're not going to get derailed. So when you present a candidate, the hiring manager is going to not question why don't they have these critical must-haves, right? So again, it's to reduce the time you're spending speaking with candidates and also taking, giving respect to the hiring managers and their time so you're not wasting them and just repeatedly interviewing people that are not even qualified for what they had in mind. So the job descriptions over the last 6 years have been very sparse, and I would recommend if you are going to create them, create very, very clear, concise ones with must-haves only. It makes everyone's life a lot easier in the long run.
It also forms the foundation for the job posting because you take those key things and put that in the job posting. And I really, when my word of advice is when you're doing job postings, make sure you identify the qualifications, whether they are assets or whether they're required. This will help narrow down the number of resumes you get, the more articulate you are. If you just say you need somebody with experience, well, you could get a person with 1 year experience or 5. And so is it 2 to 3 years experience, which means an entry level, or is it 5 plus, which is a more senior level? And then the key words, the verbs that you use about whether they're responsible for this or do they assist this or coordinate. There are different functions and there are different levels of experience. So it's really important how you post a job description and then hiring for fit. But we'll get into those in do's and don'ts. So this is a recruitment process that you can look at and slowly whittle away at them, create something different and new, and keep improving on that process. So we'll get into the 5 do's that are, I think are important for Pari and I. Now remember, Pari comes from a recruiter perspective, so some of her comments will be shared by that, and I come from the perspective of building a strategy to make things run smoothly, predictably, and more reliably to hire the best talent. And I do that both by offering my strategic perspective as well as the years of experience of hiring. I've never added the number of people, but I have been hiring for many, many, many years. Okay, so point number one is really having that process. Oops, sorry. Whoa. Is having that recruitment process. So we've already talked about that. And so we'll move over to point number two, which is timeliness. So Pari, your thoughts on timeliness as a do?
Yeah, so I've learned that I have to coach clients a lot more now, that hanging on once we start the process and not making decision is going to cost them candidates, because people like to talk to themselves. So as soon as they don't hear feedback, they start telling themselves they were not the right fit, they're going to start interviewing somewhere else, nobody wanted them. So they convince themselves not to proceed. So when I speak with clients, I have to explain what happens to the mental aspect of making people wait and not get feedback. And knowing that it can actually make things happen better and faster. So they say they don't want to move too quick because they don't want to make a rash hire. But at the same time, you can't take 5 weeks to provide feedback on a first interview. It just takes too long and people lose interest. They're not motivated. When you do call them back for a second interview, they've already taken another job. So timeliness is critical. And if a client is not willing to commit to the recruitment process with timeliness, effective feedback, timely feedback, it's probably not good time for them to start in the first place. So if you're so busy, you can't even interview or provide feedback for that interview, you weren't ready in the first place. We could start again when you are. So that's what I've learned in the timeliness is critical. You will lose really strong candidates by taking too long.
And I think it's equally important internally. If you're doing it yourself, map it out with the hiring person. Say, we need to hire as quickly as possible. I'm going to need your time to do this, and block out a time frame of this is when we're going to accept resumes. They'll keep flowing in, but in a week's time after posting, I'm going to weed it and give you the top 5 people, and then from there saying we're going to interview on this following week, and then we're going to interview second interviews the following week, make a decision. So you've mapped out roughly the time frame, and that should happen whether you're doing it externally with an agency or internally by yourself. Really important, because you really, really don't want this kind of thing to drag on. The third point is hire for fit and values. For me, that means you want the person to have the skill sets, but you can always teach the skill sets. So do look at those, but it's so important to make sure the person fits with the culture, fits with the team, and fits with the values. It's very interesting. I learned something where people will leave a company where their values aren't aligned. It doesn't mean they have to be perfectly the same, but if you have a company that's high on integrity and your values is kind of, I like to shortcut things and I like to just skim around stuff, you're not aligned. And vice versa. If a company's values are profits everything and forget the others, and you're a people person, so there's a balance between profit and people, you're not going to feel comfortable in that company because you're always going to be stressed and stretched to make profit first and not people first. So it's important for that. Thoughts, Pari?
Yes, again, because I don't have a lot of job descriptions, I base it on personality. Because I don't have the must-have skills a lot of times. So I look for personality. I don't even call it a fit anymore because it's personality add. Who can we add to the existing team that is not currently there? What are the gaps in the company? If everyone is high strung, I am not going to bring in the 5th high strung person in the team. Something's going to combust. So just really understanding that, yes, the fit is really critical. The personality is really critical. Education is really critical. Everything else can be taught, especially in a new space. People don't have 20 years of an industry experience that's only 5 years old. So you can't be asking for experts in a field that is just emerging. So it's really important to find the right personality that can take this project on and run with it.
And I think that word fit, so that people don't misinterpret, fit doesn't mean it's exactly like the person they had before, and it's exactly like everybody else we have in the company. Fit can be that gap where maybe you need a more creative person in your organization to really help move the company along with their creativity. Or maybe you need a more detailed person to make sure the projects run smoothly and the quality is there. So fit is looking also at the gaps and filling the gaps. So that kind of fit is also what I'm referring to when.
And I think that's where the psychometric testing comes in, because if you could find a candidate that has this as a skill set or personality that will fill this gap, you're more likely to pick that candidate over someone
Yeah.
if everything else is the same, but can cover that gap, right?
Well,
And I think
yeah.
that's why the how to fascinate is really critical. You can see where their strengths are and what they're not good at. So you don't want to push them in that direction.
Yeah, I find fascinate really interesting because sometimes you're looking for somebody. So if you're in accounting, for example, you want or quality is the position. You want somebody who's very detailed to do that job. You know, that's got to be one of their comfortable languages, because if it's one of what they're called dormant languages, you're in for big trouble, because if they're not quality focused, that's not a good fit. Maybe they talk like it, but they don't do it. So I find that using the fascination tool to help a company see where their gaps are and where their hiring might be needed, or whether this position needs this kind of person. So doing that fascination tool would really, really be useful. The next component is training managers in recruitment. So many people show up, they sit down calmly and they look at things and they say, "Oh, yeah, so tell me about yourself." And then they start saying, "So, how are you going to get to work on time if you've got 3 kids?" And you go, and you kind of cringe. You go, "Oh my God." So, it is important that you help managers not just show up, but really understand their role in hiring for fit and values, of being timely, and to not cross the lines when they should be. Any thoughts on that before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, can I just ask all hiring managers to have some training on this? Because it has deterred a lot of qualified candidates from taking amazing jobs because the wrong hiring manager without training was interviewing, asking questions like, why should we trust you? It's like you don't ask certain things like that. Or you look very young, or you don't look like you have enough upper body strength, like things like that. You can't make comments about people's appearance. So I think just having some critical skills about what is safe to ask, what is not. Don't ask people how much they made, especially during the first interview. Don't ask them how low are they willing to go in terms of their compensation. These are uncomfortable questions. You just met the candidate. It's not time for that, right? So I do ask that just be very careful that you are the first impression of the company they're getting these candidates. Don't ruin it by asking the wrong questions. I think you should have a safety set of questions you should ask, and others just don't even entertain them, because it will make the process end before it even gets a chance to start.
I find it interesting because I was doing a recruitment cycle process for a client, and I recognized that most of these managers, it was a startup company, had no experience in hiring people. So I said, we have to have a training program. And what turned into an hour, what I budgeted for an hour, turned into about an hour and 3/4. They had such great questions about all the aspects we've just mentioned. And I think it's really good. Even when people think they know what they're doing, they need to understand why they're doing it to attract the right candidate and not to lose them. So the fifth point is what I call, we've been expecting you. This is day one, and hiring people on day one, you want to make sure they're welcomed. And that's, I think, something, Pari, that you've mentioned too, as we've talked about what are those 5 do's.
Yeah, we've had a candidate not know what time to start on first day and could not figure out who to call or who to reach out to. And the Sunday before his first day on the job was just texting and phoning and calling, like, where do I go? What time do I go in? And I had to get C-suite involved to follow up. We found out it was in a spam email, but that's not the point. Someone should also follow up and say, hey, we didn't hear back from you. Do you know what time you're coming in on Monday? That experience does put a bit of a damper on that. And then who knows what the week's going to look like if you can't even get them to show up on time on Monday. The candidate's interested, they're motivated, they don't know where to go, what time to show up, who to ask for. So it's like having a guest in your house the first time. Be very welcoming, be prepared don't haphazardly do the job, because it does show the type of person you are, the type of company you are. So very, very cognizant of a company to be aware of that and do it right the first time.
Yeah, and it's so important. The statistics show that people know within the first 2 weeks of hire whether they made the right decision, and they're starting to look, literally starting to look, and they can tell from that. So great. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is uh, maybe just stop here to ask if there's any things in the chat line that are coming forward, Jenny, that we you want to share with the group at large.
Mostly just comments from before. Malak did mention she didn't have a recruitment process in place yet. And Diane also recommended a psychometric testing, Colby. And then I also mentioned our Fascination Advantage tool, and I put the link there. So anyone who's interested, feel free to check it out and let us know if you're interested.
Yep. There are pros and cons for many of them, but it's really, money well spent, really, when you think about it, especially for your key hires, not necessarily all your hires, but certainly the key hires. We thought there are oftentimes a lot of questions about, when do I hire? If you're a small business, do I start with contractors, which means non-employees, and then when do I decide to make them employees, looking at full-time or part-time, or use of an external recruiter? When do you do that? So I'll start and just say that you start, if you're a small business owner, you start with contractors. Hire a few people episodic, because you don't know, you don't have predictability in terms of your flow of your business. So hiring contractors to come and go as you need them is really important. It gets to a point where it's very steady work that you have, and you feel the comfort and confidence in to hire employee. And you can decide whether that's part-time or full-time, and whether you want somebody you hired that's part-time willing to go more full-time as time ramps up. But it's really understanding predictability of your work coming in, and predictability of the ups and downs. And when it gets too much, then you start to look at hires. I'm going to let Pari comment on when do you decide that you need to use an external recruiter?
Yeah, so for temp, it's probably not the best resource to use a recruitment agency like what we do. Not temp a lot of times. We want the candidates who are not easy to entice. We want to do the work where we're enticing them to partner with you. And they may come on as a contract basis, interim basis, and transition to full-time when it gets busier and their commitment is more available. So I find working with a recruitment agency such as ours, you don't want to use us for every single position. It is not good use of your time and money. What it is good for is if you don't have time, or you don't have internal HR or recruitment in-house. And second of all, if you want to scour the market to find qualified people who may potentially want to transition to full-time. So start off as a consultant, intern, and transition to full-time. That is the ideal scenario for us. Full-time, ideally. Part-time, not necessarily, because then we don't get the level of commitment, and you're using our firm to bring you talent. We want some level of commitment from these candidates. So that's my experience, is we don't want to be hiring just anybody. We want the ones that are critical to the function of this company getting to the next level. Or if it's a confidential search, you don't want to be out there telling the world you're hiring your next VP of business development, if perhaps you're getting rid of your own business development officer. So if it is a confidential search, we do encourage recruitment firm, because you keep that 3 layers of separation. If you have us reach out to the candidate, there's no harm done. Whereas if you had reached out to them, it could be considered poaching. So.
Cool. We're going to do poll number 2 now. What do you consider the most challenging aspects of recruiting? And again, this is a multiple choice question, so feel free to pick all that apply.
And I think we might have more challenges than just these 5 options. So feel free to write it in the chat. Just even like top 2 concerns that you are having with recruitment.
So we'll give you time to focus on that instead of talking. Did you want to say something, Malik?
Oh yeah, I just you know how we talked about creating some predictability in our cycles. Well, as event planners, because of COVID-19, a lot of the events have been postponed, canceled, all outright, especially for people who plan events like rock concerts, parades, etc. I haven't really been affected. If anything, my business has gone up because I do a lot of educational events where you need CME credits for licensure. But it is really very unpredictable suddenly, whereas it used to be very predictable. Now it's hard. I can get busy, suddenly, and I need somebody like yesterday, or I can go through this glut. So I'm just trying to figure out, if you have any tips on how to improve the predictability.
In COVID times, I think it's improving how we adapt to the unpredictability. That's going to be the key. I think from a workload perspective, I mean, if you have employees and you can afford them, then you keep them. Knowing, well, I'm currently using the wage subsidy to support me, and knowing that I have to ramp up, and I think that's the case when my workload gets such that it's too much for my current staff. Then I do have a couple of people that I call in to support me, and I've had those arrangements. So I think it's always kind of having a core baseline of work and then supplementing them with the contractors or associates as you need them. But COVID time has really, really made a difference. And I think for some business owners, they've actually had to then take their current employees and then make them more fluid by saying, putting them on part-time and then building up the hours as the cycle moves through. So it's very, very difficult, and a lot of adaptability and creative thinking right now to make people work out how they survive during COVID times.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The results, have we got those done now?
Yeah. So majority is on reviewing and determining which candidates, I guess it got cut off. I think it's like which candidates are fit for the company. And then it is knowing where to post to get the best candidates. Third is negotiating compensation with the candidate. And then last, validity of reference checks and interviewers not prepared for the interview.
Interesting.
I can add something about the poll results. The fact that most companies have a hard time determining which candidates to shortlist, the advantage of a recruitment agency or firm is that we do that for you. We don't want you sitting interviewing 10. We want you to focus on the top 3 after we scoured the market and interviewed 30 or 40, depending on how complex the role is. We don't want you sitting there guessing if this is the right person or not. So we want to give the opportunity that we've done the legwork, we've vetted them, we've screened them, we've verified their personalities a lot of times, as well as making sure their skill set matches what the company is going for. So when you do grant an interview, most times, more often than not, it's a sure fit. We see a really positive feedback from the clients, like this candidate is fantastic. But clients have to understand, we have to interview 20 to 30 to get you these top 3. It's not like first applicant that comes in, we flip it to you, right? So if that is the biggest hurdle, that's where we would recommend working with an agency that commits fully to doing all the vetting for you, and what's in front of you is the top talent for consideration.
I always, when I look at a resume, I look for possibility. If you're a startup company or you're a growing company, sometimes looking at that resume and saying, here's a person with HR experience, because I was looking for an HR assistant at one point, and I see this person has the potential to be my HR manager. So when we were an engineering company, I brought in this HR person and I groomed her to be the HR manager as we continue to grow. So I think sometimes we give the role of looking at the resumes to the person who just started with 3 or 2 years experience if you have a big HR company, but they really don't have enough experience to look at that resume in 30 seconds and know whether that's a yes, no, or a maybe because I don't have enough yeses. So that comes with experience, and really, when you get good at it, you can see a resume in a minute and you know whether that's a yes, no, or a maybe. So the five don'ts that we're just dying to share with you. So the first one is, don't hire just any body. And I really mean body. A lot of people get get themselves cornered into a situation where somebody just terminated, they gave you 2 weeks notice. By the time you even get the job posting up, it's like week one, and the person's gonna leave on Friday and it's already Wednesday. So sometimes in the desire to be more comfortable again, they'll hire somebody who's not perfect, and that's a big mistake. That can lead to a lot of anguish, and in the end, even a termination. What do you think, Pari?
I think it's very dangerous to just hire anybody because you're changing the existing culture and synergy of the company by bringing the bad hire in. And in fact, you may lose your own staff who are good because this new person's come in and disrupted the flow or has caused a scene or has caused conflict within the company. So if you're not careful, it's like, again, it's your home. Who you invite in really does matter. You don't just take in any stray cat. You really focus that they have the same integrity and culture and interest and respect, because that one person can turn off all your existing clients or candidates of our current employees. You don't want to do that. You have to be very careful. And we've seen it. We call them toxic hire. It happens, not through us, but they've sometimes brought in somebody. And it can actually have a ripple effect in the company by bringing one bad person into the mix.
We had a conversation between myself and one of my managers, and we talked about his fatal flaws, which I felt was going to really poison the work culture of the company. And he kept saying, "Yeah, yeah, I know, but I think we should just bring him in anyways. You know, we can always let him go." I says, "No, we're not going to let him go. He is not good. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to override you on this. We are not bringing this person in. Let's look for another candidate." So, so it is important that you just don't hire just anybody. The next one is undervalue worth, and I know Pari's really strong about this, so I'm going to let her comment first.
Oh, yes. So one thing I've seen, which is very shocking, many of my clients would rather pay more for a new hire than their existing staff who's been there for 5, 8, 9 years. Instead of promoting them from within, they do feel in order to entice talent from the outside, we'll pay them a little bit more to join our company. But people talk in a company, they're going to find out the new hire is paid significantly more than your hardworking employee who's been with you and loyal to your organization. So that is one aspect that just marvels me, because I can't get over the fact that companies would rather pay more for an external hire than promote from within. The other one is actually gender-based, and Hilda and I have talked about this on many occasions. When women go into positions, they undervalue their worth automatically. It's very rare to come across a female C-suite executive who actually even has an awareness what the market rate is. And when you tell them, they tend to say, "No, I'll take less, I'm fine with less." And then I have to go back and say, "No, you will take more," because companies will see you different if you go down with your numbers. So it's about how you're projecting your professionalism at that point. And why don't you want more money? I never understood why. Okay, I know we're not greedy, but you really need to understand, if this position pays this much across the sector, you're not doing yourself a service by taking less. Just take it for what it's offered to you, and don't lowball yourself. I know clients lowball, but then when a candidate lowballs, it's quite fascinating to watch, and it tends to be a gender issue a lot of times.
I would add to that, I think a lot of companies go in and thinking, okay, what were they making? If I give them 10% more, then they're happy. And I've saved us, $5,000, $10,000. That shouldn't be the way. We really need to look at what is fair and what is right. And because people do talk, and they'll take notes and make notes. And that could lead to kind of disgruntlement that you don't want. Oh, the next one is dragging the timelines, and in the interest of time, I know that once you do it, it's sort of the opposite of doing timeliness. Don't drag out the process, because you can lose people. Moving on to the next one is overpromise. Too many times people say, oh, we've got a fabulous work culture, when it's really toxic. Oh, you're just going to love it here. We do all this thing and we're going to promote you in 1 year. Don't overpromise, because that's again going to lead to disgruntlement, disengagement, and you're not going to have, a productive person. So be honest, really be honest about things. Pari, anything before we move to the last point?
Well, I'm a recruiter. I have to entice people. So when a client tells me they're going to do something, they have to deliver. And I usually hold them to it. So I'm very cognizant when I'm in an interview with a client and they're saying certain things, then I have to ensure it's in the contract, because now you've said it not only to the candidate, but to me in public where everybody heard. So if you are going to overpromise as a recruiter, I'll have you put it in a contract because you promised. So now you've said it and we have to now put it in writing. So if you are going to do it, be very careful, because our firm will tend to make you stick to it and actually commit to it. So
Well,
but it's hard if you do it verbally, and if a recruiter's not there, we can't really hold anything. But I've been in meetings where a company has said something to a candidate, that contract comes out, it's not indicated anywhere there, and I've had to make them put it in because I heard it, the candidate heard it, you said it, so now you have to honor it and put it in your contract.
well, that's our integrity piece. Like, we stick by, if I hear something, then I've heard it and I have to act upon it in any way. And the last thing is, you don't want to ask questions that may violate human rights. So that includes, gender equity, that includes, discrimination, color, race, creed, all of those things that are under the human rights umbrella. And I think it's important that people learn how to ask the right questions. So speaking of questions, we've given you probably a lot of tips and strategies I hope that you will take with you. Are there any questions at this point? Any other questions? Any other comments? People want to come forward?
Feel free to unmute if you guys have any questions or comments. I know someone commented that they have 45 bilingual juvenile detention officers that they are struggling to fill. So maybe he or she would like to come out and comment whether there is a question or comment for that.
And certainly, if you're not comfortable, we'll be happy to, offer a discovery call and chat with you more specifically about your particular needs. Which I guess brings me to this slide. Do you want to come forward, or we can chat, more privately? We do offer a 30-minute free discovery call with me to talk about your HR strategies or leadership, or connect with RevUp. And if you want to talk to Pari, you can contact me, and I can make those arrangements, or you can do it. I'll show you our contact slides. There are two more pop-up chats here.
Yeah. Oh, apparently she doesn't have a
She can't talk, but feel free to put it in the chat line, or then comment on it. Our upcoming slides, our upcoming webinars, as you know, we do it every 2 weeks. So today we're actually doing a session on November the 19th that talks about the Connect with RevUp process and the secret sauce for retaining your top talent. And then on November 25th, we're going to do EP31, which is performance empowerment, how to engage today's staff. So here's our contact information. I do want to mention that we do have all of these presentations on YouTube. You can click and join our YouTube channel. You'll get a copy of an email for today's chat webinar, and you can look at some of our others. Some hot ones that you might be interested in is the power of decisiveness, sharing business experiences. It was a panel discussion by 5 of us actually, in various aspects of business. And then one was on employment law. We've done a couple of them on employment law with Stuart Rudner. And last time we did mental exhaustion, how to refuel. So if you want to contact us, this is Pari's information, and mine is after that. I appreciate everybody's time today. I thank again East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring us, and that's my contact. Really want to thank everybody today. I hope you um, got a few takeaways that you can use in your process of hiring and recruiting the top talent that you need in your organization. So thanks very much. Thank you everybody very much for joining us today.
Hilda, thank you
Thank
everyone for
you, Mary.
attending.
Pardon?
I said thank you as well. Thank you for having me speak on this. And I think we're all going to get ready for the 11 o'clock moment of silence for Remembrance Day.
Yes.
So everyone will be in our thoughts who served our country.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you. And do have your 1 minute of silence at 11 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.